if the house you walked into did not want to let you walk back out? Not a locked door, not a broken window, not a physical thing that stopped you. Something else, something older, something that worked on you the way water works on stone, slowly, quietly, without announcing itself, until one day you look down and the stone is gone and the water is still there, moving, and you do not remember when the change happened. I have been inside one house like that in my life. One was enough. My name is Patrick. I am 34 years old. I live in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon, and I sleep with 2 lights on, and I have not spent a single night in a house older than 1990 since the summer I was 19. People who know me now do not know why. People who knew me before that summer do not recognize who I became after it. My college roommate, who was with me inside the Hargrove mansion on the night this story is about, has not spoken to me since. Not because we fought, because we made an agreement, the 2 of us, standing outside that house in the dark at 4 in the morning, with our clothes wet and our hands shaking, that we would never speak about what happened inside, that we would put it in a box and close the box and walk away from the box and never open it again. He kept his end. I am breaking mine because I have kept this inside for 15 years and it has taken up too much room for too long. And tonight, I am going to put it down. Right here, all of it. The Hargrove mansion. The night of July 14th. What was in the east wing? What was in the mirror? What was in the basement? What followed us home? The Hargrove mansion sat on 6 acres of land outside a small town in upstate New York called Dellers Creek, and it had been empty for 22 years when my college roommate Dev and I decided on a hot July night in our 19-year-old wisdom to go inside it. The mansion was not hard to find information about. It was locally famous. The kind of locally famous that means everyone in a 50-mile radius has a story about it. And most of the stories involve someone going in on a dare and coming out changed, or going in on a dare and not coming out at all, which was probably an exaggeration, but was repeated with enough consistency to contain at least the shape of something true. The Hargrove family had built the house in 1887. Edmund Hargrove was a businessman of the era, the kind of businessman who had money before laws caught up with the ways he was making it. He built the mansion as a statement of arrival, the way men like him did in that era. 7 bedrooms, 4 floors, a grand staircase, a ballroom, a library, an east wing added in 1901 that was, by several accounts, never used by the family after it was built. Edmund Hargrove died in 1923. His wife had died in 1909. Their children sold the house and moved away, and the house passed through several owners over the following decades, none of whom stayed long. The last family to live in it, a family whose name I will not give here, for reasons that will become clear, left in 2001 without selling it, without explanation, leaving furniture and dishes and clothing, and by all accounts, considerable amount of personal belongings still inside, as if they had walked out one morning and simply never come back. The house stood empty after that. The land around it grew wild. The local town made occasional noise about doing something with it, but nothing was ever done. And generations of teenagers and college students from the surrounding area went in on dares and came out with stories that got bigger and stranger every year. Dev and I got in through a basement window on the south side that had been broken for years. It was 9:30 at night. We had flashlights. We had our phones. We had that specific kind of 19-year-old confidence that is really just fear that has been loudly told to be quiet. We went in. We should not have gone in. The basement was what you would expect from an 1887 house. Stone walls, low ceiling, a dirt floor in one section, and old concrete in another, rusted pipes, and the smell of standing water, and something older underneath that, something that basements in very old houses sometimes have, a smell like the earth itself, like deep, cold ground that has never seen sunlight. We moved through the basement quickly. Nothing remarkable. Storage shelves, most of them empty or holding rusted cans and rotted cardboard. An old coal furnace that was the size of a small car, cold and long dead. A door to a room that was locked. We noted it, tested the lock, moved on. The ground floor was more interesting. The family that had left in 2001 had left everything. The kitchen still had dishes in the cupboards, visible through the glass-fronted cabinets, still stacked neatly, as if waiting for a meal that was never made. The dining room table was set, plates and glasses and silverware, a centerpiece of dried flowers so old and desiccated they crumbled when Dev accidentally bumped the table. The living room had furniture covered in dust sheets, making shapes under the white fabric that looked, in the beam of a flashlight, almost like people sitting still. Almost like an audience. Dev made a joke about it. I laughed. We moved on. The grand staircase was still solid. The wood was old and darkening, but structurally sound, and it rose from the center of the entrance hall in a wide, sweeping curve that must have been genuinely impressive in 1887, when the house was full of light and people. We went up. The second floor was bedrooms. 6 of them, doors closed, and we opened each one and looked in. More covered furniture. Personal items in one room, a child's drawings pinned to the wall, colorful and ordinary. A house and a son and a family of stick figures. In another, clothing still in an open suitcase on the bed, as if someone had been packing or unpacking and simply stopped. A book open on a nightstand, face down to keep the page. The pages yellowed and wavy with age. Nothing alarming. Nothing that explained why the family had left everything behind. We went to the 3rd floor. The east wing was accessible from the 3rd floor through a door at the end of a corridor. The door was different from the other doors in the house. Heavier, older, the wood darker and denser, with a frame that did not quite match the rest of the corridor, as if it had been built at a different time. by different hands with a different purpose in mind. Edmund Hargrove had added the East Wing in 1901, 14 years after the main house was built. He had added it, according to the local histories, without an architect, without permits, without, as far as anyone could tell, a clear plan of what he was building or why. The door was not locked. Dev pushed it open. The East Wing corridor was shorter than I expected, maybe 30 feet, with 2 doors on the right side and a single door at the end. The air in the corridor was different from the rest of the house. The rest of the house was stuffy, warm with stored July heat, the kind of air that has been sitting still for years. The East Wing corridor was cold, not cool cold, a deep, still, sourceless cold that hit my skin the moment I stepped through the door and did not let go. Dev said, "It is cold in here." I said, "Yes." We looked at each other. We did not say what we were both thinking, which was, it should not be cold. It is July. This building has no working climate systems. There is no physical reason for this cold. We went forward. The first door on the right opened into a small room, empty, completely empty. Not even dust sheets. The floorboards bare and gray. But on the walls, marks. Not written, not painted. Pressed into the plaster, the way you press a finger into wet clay. Handprints. Dozens of them, covering all 4 walls from floor to ceiling. Small and large, adult and child-sized, overlapping and layered in a pattern that was not random. They were arranged in rows, careful rows, like a record, like a list of attendants, like someone had documented every person who had ever been in this room by pressing their hands into the walls while the plaster was still soft. In 1901, the year the wing was built, the plaster had been soft for a very short time. I counted 47 handprints before I stopped counting. Dev was very quiet beside me. We backed out of the room. The second door on the right opened into a room that had 1 piece of furniture, a single large mirror, freestanding, in a frame of dark carved wood, standing in the exact center of the room, as if it had been placed there with great deliberateness. It was tall, floor to ceiling, or close to it. The glass was old, the kind of old mirror glass that is slightly wavy and gives your reflection a quality of movement, of being almost but not quite still. Dev shone his flashlight at it, and our reflections appeared 2 19-year-old boys in a dark room, flashlights in hand, looking at themselves in an old mirror in an empty house at 10:30 at night. Ordinary, explainable, except the reflections were not quite right, not wrong enough to name immediately, not wrong in a way that made you say, "That is wrong." Wrong in a way that made you uneasy without knowing why. The way a photograph of a room you know well looks strange because something has been moved and you cannot identify what. I stood in front of the mirror and I looked at my reflection, and something was off and I could not find what it was. Then Dev moved. He stepped to his left toward the door. His reflection did not move. I watched this happen. Dev's physical body moved left. Dev's reflection remained standing exactly where it had been. For 1 second, just 1 second, the reflection was in a different position than the body casting it. Then the reflection caught up. Smoothly, without any jerk or stutter, as if it had simply been delayed by a fraction of a moment that was too small to be explained by anything reasonable. Dev had not noticed. He was looking at his phone. I said, "Dev." He looked up. I said, "Move your arm." He raised his right arm. The reflection raised its right arm, perfectly synchronized. I said nothing. I looked at the mirror for another moment. The reflection looked back at me, perfectly synchronized, perfectly normal. But I had seen it. 1 second, 1 step out of place. I walked out of the room. I told Dev we should move on. I did not tell him what I had seen. I should have told him. That was my mistake. If I had told him, we might have left. We might have been out of that house before midnight, before the basement, before everything. But I was 19, and I was not sure of what I had seen, and I did not want to sound frightened. So I said nothing, and we went to the door at the end of the corridor. The door at the end of the East Wing corridor was locked. Not with a padlock, with a key lock, old and heavy, the kind that needs a large iron key. We did not have that key. Dev pushed against the door, and it did not move. He pushed harder. Nothing. I put my ear against the door. I heard breathing. Slow, regular. The breathing of something asleep. Deep and slow and rhythmic. The way a very large animal breathes when it is resting. From directly behind the door, from very close to the door, as if whatever was breathing was lying right up against the other side of it. I stepped back from the door. Dev said, "What?" I said, "There is something behind this door." Dev put his ear to the door. He listened. His face changed. He stepped back too. He said, "That is an animal. A large animal. Something got in through a broken window, and it is sleeping in there." I said, "Yes, probably." We looked at each other. We both knew it did not sound like any animal either of us could name. It was too slow, too deep, too regular. Animals breathe with small variations, a shift, a snuffle, the rhythm of something alive and dreaming. This was perfectly metronomic. In and out, like a machine, like a recording, like something that was not breathing because it needed to, but because it wanted you to hear it. We left the East Wing. We went back through the heavy door into the main corridor. We pulled the door shut behind us. The breathing stopped the moment. The door clicked closed. Dev and I stood in the corridor, and neither of us said anything for a long time. Then he said, "Basement. We should check the basement. Then we leave." I said, "Why the basement?" He said, "Because there was a locked room down there, and now I want to know what is in it." I said, "Dev, let us just leave." He was already walking toward the stairs. The locked room in the basement had a door that was not, on closer inspection, as solidly locked as it had seemed the first time. The lock was old and the door frame was warped. And when Dev put his shoulder against it the second time, the wood around the lock gave way with a sound like something exhaling, and the door swung open. The room behind it was small, barely larger than a closet, and it contained 3 things. The first was a chair, an old wooden chair, plain and sturdy, sitting in the center of the room facing the door, as if whoever sat in it had sat there specifically to look at whoever came through the door. The second was a table beside the chair. On the table was a single object, a small leather notebook, dark with age, closed with a strap. The third was on the wall directly behind the chair. Not a mark, not a handprint. A photograph, old, sepia-toned, in a simple frame nailed to the stone wall. A formal portrait. A man seated in a chair. A man I did not recognize, and would not have recognized regardless, because he was a man from 1901, and I was born in 1990. Except Dev shone his flashlight on the photograph. The man in the photograph was wearing modern clothes, not 1901 formal wear, not the high collar and dark suit of the era. Jeans, a gray t-shirt, sneakers, and the man in the photograph was looking directly at the camera with an expression that was not a formal portrait expression, not stiff, not posed, an expression of someone who has been waiting, who has seen something arrive that they have been expecting for a long time. Dev and I looked at the photograph for a long time. Then Dev picked up the notebook. I said, "Do not open that." He opened it. The pages were blank except for the last one. And on the last one, in fresh ink that was still faintly wet and shining in the flashlight beam. Ink that could not have been in that notebook for more than a few hours. 2 names were written. Patrick, Dev, our names. Written in a notebook in a locked room in a basement of a house that had been empty for 22 years. Written tonight while we were upstairs. We ran. There is no dignified way to say it. We ran. Out of the basement room, through the basement, up through the broken window, across the dark overgrown yard, to the road, to Dev's car. And we drove away from the Hargrove mansion at 80 miles an hour on a back road in upstate New York at 4 in the morning. And we did not speak for 40 minutes when we finally stopped at a gas station off the highway, bright fluorescent light, an attendant watching us with mild suspicion through the window. Dev said, "Someone was in there with us. Someone who knew our names. Someone who was watching us the whole time." I said, "The photograph." He said, "The man was wearing modern clothes. Someone staged that room. Someone put that photograph there. Someone wrote our names in that notebook while we were upstairs." He said this the way a person says something they are using as a life raft. A logical explanation, held onto very hard. I said, "Dev, the notebook ink was wet, fresh. We went into that room maybe 10 minutes after we left the basement the first time. We were in the east wing for about 40 minutes. We were in that house for less than 3 hours total. If a person had been in that room, a physical person, they would have had to enter the house after us, go directly to the basement, unlock that room from the inside, write our names, and still be inside the building when we came back down. Dev stared at me. I said, the window we came in through was the only way in. We were between that window and the basement room the entire time we were there. Nobody came in after us. Nobody was in that room before us. The lock gave on the outside. And the photograph, Dev. The man in the photograph was wearing your t-shirt. Dev looked down at his shirt. Gray, the same exact gray. He had bought it 3 days ago, the day before we drove up to Dellers Creek. A shirt that did not exist when any photograph in that house could have been taken. Dev did not speak for a very long time. Then he said, "Then who wrote our names?" I had been thinking about this since the moment I saw the wet ink, about the mirror, about the reflection that had been one step behind, about what I had not told Dev because I was 19 and did not want to sound frightened, about what a mirror that could delay a reflection by one step might be able to do with a little more time, a little more preparation, a little more of whatever it had been doing in that East Wing room for 22 years. I said, I think it knew we were coming before we did. Dev looked at me. I said, I think it has been knowing for a very long time exactly who was going to walk through that door. And I think it wrote what it wrote so we would find it, so we would leave with it, so we would carry it out of that house the way we carried it. Dev said, what did we carry? I did not know how to answer that. I still do not. All I know is what happened in the 3 months after that night. The dreams Dev told me about before he stopped talking to me. The same dreams I was having. The photographs in my apartment, the ones of me alone in my room, taken from an angle that had no camera, appearing in my phone's camera roll overnight. The reflections. Oh, the reflections in windows, in spoons, in the dark screen of a phone held at the wrong angle, half a second behind. Always half a second behind. As if something came home with us. As if it had always planned to. As if the house did not hold you because it wanted you inside. It held you just long enough to send something back out with you. The Hargrove mansion is still standing. I looked it up last year, still empty, still on its 6 acres outside Dellers Creek, still locally famous, still drawing teenagers and college students and ghost hunters with cameras and people who do not believe in things they have not seen yet. I do not know what Edmund Hargrove built in his East Wing in 1901. I do not know what the 47 handprints on the wall were for. I do not know what breathed behind the locked door, or what made the photograph, or who wrote 2 names in a notebook in fresh ink in a room that was locked from the outside. I know that it knew our names. I know it knew Dev's shirt. I know something came home with me. And I know it has been here, in whatever way these things are here, ever since. My reflections are normal now. Mostly. They sync correctly in good light, in clear mirrors, in the daytime. It is only at night. only in old mirrors and dark windows and the backs of spoons and the black surface of a phone screen in a dim room. Half a second, always half a second behind, as if it is still learning the timing, as if it is still settling in, as if 15 years is not very long at all for something that has been inside a house since 1901. Do not go into old houses. Do not open locked rooms. Do not look into mirrors in empty places. And if your reflection is ever, just once, just for a fraction of a second, somewhere you have not moved to yet, leave. Do not ask questions. Do not look for explanations. Do not wait to be sure. Just leave, because the house does not need to keep you inside. The house just needs a moment. One moment with you close enough, still enough, looking into something reflective enough. And then it is not the house that has something. It is you. Good night. Check your reflection before you sleep. And if it blinks before you do, I am sorry. I truly am.